The Institute of Internal Auditors presents All Things Internal Audit. Hey, Audit Pros, we've got a special episode this week. I'm joined by our senior editor, Christine Janesko, author of the Internal Auditor magazine feature on weather risk, storm signals. We're sharing some of the interview moments that couldn't fit, but conversations you don't want to miss.
Thanks so much, Catie. For this story, I talked with climate experts, building research scientists, and an internal audit veteran. Together, they show how extreme weather has become a governance and resilience issue and what questions internal audit should be asking. So let's start with Rachael Gauthier. She's a meteorologist at the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, which conducts extreme weather testing on buildings and houses. She talks about how storms that don't always make national or international headlines are actually responsible for the biggest overall insured losses here in the U.S., and how these storms are expanding across the country. Here's what Rachael had to say.
A big part of our research is severe convective storms, which is just our industry term for severe thunderstorms. And also one of the most surprising things that I've learned since coming to IBHS is that a lot of people, when you think of what is the most devastating or financially devastating like disaster, a lot of people immediately go to hurricanes or maybe wildfires, but it's actually severe convective storms. They're responsible for the highest percentage of insured losses across the country every year. We're seeing hail affect a larger portion of the country. We're seeing that the areas that experience that frequent severe hail, which is 1 inch in diameter and larger, we're seeing that really expand across a greater portion of the country. Historically, think of like Tornado Alley across the Midwest, Kansas and Nebraska have been like the home of hail and tornadoes, but not anymore. It's all the way through all of the Midwest, across to the Southeast, and even portions of like the Ohio River Valley, like Kentucky and Ohio and places like that are experiencing, more of these severe thunderstorm events. So we're just seeing that area really expand, and going back to the increasing number of people living in these areas also is contributing to that amount of insured losses being pushed up. But that's really the climate influence. Is we're seeing warmer temperatures across parts of the country that haven't previously been warm. Warm temperatures in Ohio in the middle of winter are leading to tornado outbreaks now. So really more unusual things that plays into it also.
So for audit teams, that means expanding the risk lens, vendors, facilities, and people may now sit in emerging hail and wind zones. So after hearing from Rachael, I feel like that kind of jumps us into our next big question, which is what happens when extreme weather hits unexpectedly?
That's a good question, Catie. And that's where our next guest comes in. I talked with Hans-Martin Füssel at the European Environment Agency about how some regional governments are working to adapt to this new normal of extreme weather. For instance, what happens when water has nowhere to go? Hans gives us a really fascinating look at a city that's actually solving this problem.
One quite interesting example is Copenhagen municipality. 2011, Copenhagen experienced a massive downpour. Many roads were flooded. The main hospital was centimeters away from evacuation. Most basements of houses were flooded. And this was before we had very good understanding of how much this is even linked with climate change. There were good projections, but it was a window of opportunity to increase efforts to really develop a comprehensive floodwater management strategy. And it is now also recognized internationally. Often Copenhagen is mentioned as a sponge city.
A sponge city?
Sponge, S-P-O-N-G.
Okay.
Where basically the idea is that if you have extreme amounts of water in a short time, yes, channeling it somewhere, and Copenhagen is a coastal city, so there are in principle opportunities, but you cannot channel everything. So you also need to have storage places in the city. This can be green areas, blue areas, or specific infrastructure to buffer away this highest peak and prevent flooding. So this involves some hard infrastructure, wider channels and so on, but it involves also redesigning urban areas, redesigning parks, streets. So parks can store flood water. Streets have been reshaped so they can be channels that lead the water into directions that are no longer where it's less dangerous.
When did they start this and how far into it are they?
Well, that is started relatively soon after the flooding in 2011, and it's a 20-year strategy with back then around 2 billion euro estimated costs. Now that was more than 10 years ago. I don't know what the update is. And just from my own personal view, I see quite a bit of construction work in different areas of the city over those years. My understanding is that we're well on the way.
Yeah, Christine, when you shared that with me and I heard Sponge City, I was a little thrown back, but I feel like Copenhagen is a terrific example of a community's resilience and ingenuity.
Yeah, it really is, Catie. And the public sector is, of course, on the front line of this issue. Speaking of public sector, we're going to hear from someone next who's been in the command seat during real emergencies. Paul Morris is a retired public sector internal auditor and a retired Coast Guard reserve officer. Here he's talking about the importance of communication during a disaster. Let's listen in.
So, a significant challenge that I've witnessed and experienced is simply communicating the potential for an extreme weather event to an organization or a community. And we say the potential for that weather event, but could it be the potential for any type of incident, right? Just being able to communicate that with adequate warning. Adequate warning is the big thing. And there are a lot of factors that impact that. It could be system bandwidth considerations for the notification systems or applications that are used, right? It could be unclear policy or processes for who's doing the communicating or how that communication happens when it goes out. Message fatigue is a big thing, especially in organizations that are always sending out notices, right? So you want to make sure that you're thoughtful about what goes out and when and why. That can kind of lead to a little bit of paralysis by analysis of it. Should we send this message out? Should we not? And then time goes by that it would have been helpful. So message fatigue is a big thing. Even the time of day or the time of night can impact whether a communication is successful or if it's even heated when the message is received. As an example of a large organization, whether it be, public sector or even a private sector, a manufacturing concern, whatever, big storms rolling in, you need to start doing some things and making sure that folks are, weather ready and weather aware, but it's 5 after 5 and everyone's heading out to the parking lot and no one's going to get that message on their laptop, and if they've done the work, then message alerts will show up on their handheld devices, but is that adequate and have they done enough work to do that? So, there's a lot of things that you can do. Organization staff can do a lot of things to sort of overcome those communication challenges. They can exercise the communication process. They can make it clear to staff what their roles are and even what their expected outcomes of responding to a weather event, right? Like, I have a staff of 10 people. And, hey, guys, when I send y'all a text message, just something simple with a 1 on it or a 911, I need everybody to reply back and let me know if you're safe, right? So all those things can make it really easy to do. And these aren't hard things to do. They're not hard at all. Tabletop exercises, again, they're a great tool to familiarize executive teams and policy groups, again, about what those event response steps are. And again, for internal audit, that's low-hanging fruit.
Paul makes such a great point. And I know when I was a photojournalist and I was out in the field dealing with extreme weather, and I'm talking Buffalo, New York, so this means whiteouts, all kinds of storms, communication was always one of the biggest issues.
Yes, and when you zoom out from communication, you hit the risk that ties all of this together. Because what if everyone you depend on, every vendor, every partner, every neighboring region is hit all at the same time? To understand that bigger picture, I spoke with Bob Ward from the London School of Economics, and here's what he had to say.
One of the big challenges in addition with climate change is that it is the so-called mother of all correlated risk multiplier. So what it means is that not only are you dealing with the problem, but everybody else is dealing with the same problem all around the world. And our ability to cope and recover usually depends on the fact that, well, we're suffering, but our neighbors maybe aren't and will be able to help us. But climate change is driving an increase in risk everywhere. So everybody is going to be dealing with this, and therefore everybody is going to be tied up with this. And we won't always, so the question is whether we will be able to cope in the same ways in the past. If you, for instance, rely on a particular, repair shop to help with damaged. But if they get damaged, even if they're in another part of the country, because they're dealing with a different set of weather events that have also been made more frequent, it's just going to make it more difficult. And that's an even more complicated part. Our ability to cope and recover will be compromised by the fact that all these risks are correlated. They're all getting worse all at the same time.
So you said it's the mother of correlated risks.
The mother of all correlated risks, yeah. I worked in the insurance industry for a couple of years, and we talked about correlated risks. So loss events that are not independent of each other, but are linked because they're caused by, have the same fundamental cause. And this is a case where the increase in the intensity and frequency is all linked to climate change and all happening together at the same time. So it's all correlated in that way.
All of these perspectives, from hailstorms to sponge city engineering to communication breakdowns to global supply chain strains, point to one truth, according to all the people I've talked to. Weather risk isn't a background issue anymore. It's shaping governance, operations, and resilience in every industry.
Thank you so much, Christine, for walking us through these conversations and sharing these stories with us.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
If you haven't checked out Storm Signals yet, you can read it now and the rest of the December issue, linked in the show notes. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and rate us. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also catch other episodes on YouTube or at theiia.org. That's THEIIA.org.